What is up, everybody? I got a question from a prep member, and he wanted to know if I could just start with a blank chart, build out um, setups and stuff, how I build out my charts, where I put lines, why I put lines, where I put them from scratch. And then once I do that, I'm going to go through a day of hypothetical setups and why I would take a specific trade using these things. So that's what we're going to do. It's obviously a long video. This should allow prep members to better understand what what it looks like when it's blank and what it ultimately becomes. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. Today is the 12th. So we'll start with a 10-minute chart. And by the way, if you're interested in prep, link in the description to my coffee. You can become a member where you get access to tens of hours of footage of me. And I'm doing this video for them. However, if you guys elect not to be a prep member, that's completely okay. Hopefully this helps you guys understand what's going on in my charts better. So those of you who do pay for prep, this video is for you guys, just so you know. So first things first is when we press F6 on Sierra charts, we have a 1095-day profile on the right. I'm going to do a different video on why I use composites, why I use the 3-year profile. This isn't that video. This is how to build everything out. This will be much like the profile video, if you guys have watched that, which I highly suggest. But what I would do is go ahead and pause the video and just get screenshots of this shit if you want. The only difference is between this and the NQ is NQ is compressed at a 4-to-1 right here. Where is it? So instead of it being 1 at the IN32, it's 4. Russell and ES are the same. So, and there's really not much down here. It's all pretty stock. I'll keep going down and just pause. And there you go. Okay, so that's the basis of things. There's other stuff here like current price line and whatever. But anyways, for those who want to know how to draw a profile, it's in the tools section, draw volume profile right here. Okay, so now we have our base 10-minute chart. So this is where we're going to start. And honestly, we've been in a range for fucking ever. I think we've been in a range since, okay, that's May. So we want to capture this range we're currently in. There's a composite on a higher time frame chart. You can see that there's a range being put in play. Unfortunately, I deleted that. However, we're going to keep drawing this profile all the way to the left until I am breaking out of this upper range, which should be... This has been going on for a few weeks now. Yeah, I think we're breaking out of the range at this point. So on higher time frames, I want to capture a range. So notice when I drag in the profile video, I talk about these things, same concept. Notice how it's kind of creating a new profile down here. I believe the range is up here. So we'll keep it dragged out about that far back. Now, the thing is, again, I think the profile video is hugely important for you guys to watch, as well as the range video. There's going to be a playlist. Look for that. So what I want to do is get rid of these extending value zone lines because they're not accurate. And it's under 55, so I'll go to here and go none. And I know there's all these curves in this section. Oops. So what I want to do is just, there's a bigger value zone here. And then you can see there's one up here. There's a micro curve up here. There's a curve here. However, if you zoom out, the whole thing kind of looks like a curve. It's a little goofy right here, so that's telling me something that we want to really look on these low nodes, because leaning on low nodes is always a good thing. Again, this video isn't to explain why I'm doing certain things. It's to show you how I mark up areas. And there's clearly a distribution zone, a whole different distribution zone down here. So what I want to do at this point is I'm going to take these solid lines and just mark out, and I'm going to change the color to red. One day I'll hotkey this. And then label needs to be changed. We need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of, yeah. There you go. I don't care about what price it is at. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to go ahead and just mark these key levels. I'm going to copy and adjust this. There's a few low nodes up here I want to know about. Copy and adjust here. Copy and adjust here. See, I'm just pulling out these key low nodes on this composite, which we're still trading in, by the way. And we're going to do, I know you in Sierra, you can get the profile to draw lines for you on low nodes and high nodes, but I'm very particular about where they go. So I rather do it myself. I rather analyze it myself. Copy and adjust. There's another low node there. See, and there's like a small distribution zone there. I want these really key low nodes. Copy and adjust. Copy and adjust. Another low node there. Now, there's going to be something important when it comes to copy and adjust. Right there, too. And then copy and adjust. So that's quite a bit. What I do next is I want to label how many times something was pivoted. So we're gonna, this is gonna be a long one. So let's go all the way to the far right, and it's gonna be easier to do it from the far right. So let's pretend like today didn't trade, and we're gonna comb through today's session on the ES. So let's pretend like, let me just do this. So we're going to go to tools, and we're going to go to a vertical line. And we're going to go ahead and go to this specific day. And we're going to just pretend like none of this shit traded. So what I want to do next is, well, hell, we should go up to the open. What time was the open at? 8:30, so right before CPI. I talked about how I was pretty confident the market was going to go up in prep, actually. This is CPI day, by the way. So from the left of this red line, we're going to start marking shit up. So notice this low node right here. It's a low node that matches with the 3-year low node. So the fact that these two vastly different composites match low nodes is good. So we're going to put in EV1, and then I'll put a down symbol to let myself know that the market had cycled down, and it had tested that red line one time. So I'm going to put MC for major composite, and then 3Y, because it's a major composite and a 3-year low node, and they're matching. So we want to go ahead and probably copy this. So it dumped right there. there's a low node here. You can see. Problem is it doesn't really match with the 3-year. I really want shit that's sort of matching. That's an okay low node, like it is matching. So I rather use this one. So same concept. Here's a test, and then here's another test. So even though it breached this red line, in this circumstance, I'm going to count it as a test, okay? So this is where it gets a bit more like a dark art. So it's tested it twice. So EV2, oops, that's an up symbol, down. Major composite and 3-year. So they're matching. For the most part, we could use that low node, but it's a little too close to this peaky high node. So we're going to just start from the high and work our way down right there. We don't need to measure this test because, we're working from left to right. This is and remember, we're going to do a test day from this green line over. So we tested this. That's the last place we tested on the price action. This red line is, well, actually, no, it goes through it on the upside. So it's actually going to be an EV2 on the upside. And let me zoom in to show you why. Right here, 1, 2, 2 tests. I need at least 10 minutes in between tests, and it needs a pullback so far to get a good second EV test, which is all it is a test of a line. These low nodes match as well. This will, and you can see how it did hold the market down. Now this is going to be an EV0 because it never pulled back to it. So we're going to go to EV0. So I know it never bounced because bouncing is very important for me. So I know we're above it, but it never tested and bounced it, which is important for me. This one did, and this one got tested about twice. There's a slight pullback here. So we're going to put about 2. And guys, I'm going through, when I'm doing this for real, I'm going to go through with a more fine-tooth comb and look at these levels on a 30-second chart and really determine things, but for the sake of just understanding what's going on. So again, this one's an EV2, I think, yes, upside test. Wait, I don't remember which one we're doing. Yes. And the low nodes match on the 3-year and the composite over there, the multi-week composite. Now, if we was at all-time highs, this 3-year wouldn't really be worth a shit. And to be honest with you, we really don't need to go down any further because, well, we're going to be looking at this day to the right. So I'm not going to just keep going. The next thing I would do, so I would label that based off of how many times something was tested, right? So the next thing I want to do is copy and adjust drawing. So right here on the composite are a bunch of high nodes. This is the POC. So it's going to get a dash line, and it's going to be I don't know if it was ever tested on the, no, it wasn't. EV0, and this is going to be VPOC, MC for major composite on the left, and 3-year. Now, I may have multiple composites, so I will label more composites in this section. If I have more composites, because sometimes you get a 3-day composite, because right now this one's a few weeks old on the left. And I'll be doing a video on composites at a later date and time. So since this is the, I'm going to copy and adjust this real quick. There's another high node right there and here, but On my prep, all 4 of these high nodes have these dashed lines. Since it is the most major point of control, the highest node in this entire deal, it's going to get a thicker line. So if it's like an extraordinarily like very pivotal, massive high node or a low node, I will thicken up the line to show that. So next, I want to just sort of, you have a high node there. You have one here, and that's on both of them. And this would be an EV1 because it pulls, wait, yeah, EV1, 2. It's probably more than an EV2, but in this section, this dashed line really holds. So we would come in and do this, and then I will go up. So let's make it bigger. Now, if it's a high node that's on the 3-year, but it's not on the composite, I still want to know about that. So I don't necessarily always want these lines to match a high node or a low node on the composite. It's just like, what is key shit? Like, what sticks out? So, I mean, this is pretty elementary shit. You have one right here as well, which I would drop, and then it looked like it attempted to hold, but we would have to zoom in. And since I'm not sure, I'm just going to make it a 0. So I would double check on the 30-second. But again, we're looking at a specific day that kept going up. So let's go ahead. So I would do this node here. So let me just do this so you know exactly what it is that I'm looking at. So we're just going to erase it. So even though that's not a high node on the composite, that's still very prominent right here. This one I may not really do, but this is extremely prominent. This is extremely prominent. This is too. This one maybe. You just kind of, sometimes I remember these things, so that for sure. And this area is a little goofy in this region as well. So now we have, our high nodes and low nodes. This one, hypothetically, it's not on that. So let's put VPOC 3-year. It's not on the composite. And at the time, it's an EV0. So these high nodes and low nodes are just like key structure we can like lean on, and they work. They pivot shit, and it's higher time frame stuff. So a really high node on these composites is extremely magnetic, extremely popular. So many contracts is traded there, so therefore it's very popular, especially after weeks or days or even years of trading through that same level many, many times over. I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands of contracts on these composites. Same with the low nodes. Those are excruciatingly unpopular prices, and that's a fact. I mean, you can't argue with that. Higher nodes, more volume, more popular. Lower nodes, lower volume, less popular. That is a fact. It is that simple to understand that you can lean on these things, and I do a lot. So especially these red areas, those are really key to where these red areas can really pivot the market hard. Like, for instance, in this section, this high node was here, and then when we came back, and I talk about it in the prep, it bounced it, and then it bounced it again. It makes sense. It made sense that when it first came down here on the 6th, that it would potentially mid pivot it, which I talk about in the range video and the profile video. In the profile video and that range video, I don't remember which one, but I talk about mid pivots. And this high node was already here when that happened. So like, I'll show you real quick. So I'm going to grab this profile and I'm going to shrink it. Oops. Wait, was it that they? Oh, it was right here. So at this time when this was getting tested, this high node was here. So this is what the profile looked like on the 6 at that time. So that just kind of goes to show you that, see, and as I drag the profile, it's building, it's almost like a playback feature. So when I drag the profiles, like I'm looking at it, what it looked like in real time. So it's like I'm snapshotting the past. And now this is what the profile currently looks like. This is what the profile looked like before today. This is what it looks like after today. So next, let's make sure I don't need to drag. I swear to God, if I got to drag this further back. No. All right, thank God. Okay, so next, now that we have all this noise on here, you know, we want to look for gaps potentially. How I cut gaps up. So these are going to be low noded areas, generally with a more square cut in the 3-year profile. There's a gap. Here's one, but I think it's a little janky. There's a smaller one there. There's another one here. See how it's got that square cutout. If it has a hard taper, I don't want to use it. But those square cutouts mean that the volume suddenly drops in those areas. Where if it tapers in, it's a gradual decrease. So you don't get like this instant momentum that I typically look for. Now, there's a lot of nuance with gap plays, and these are not to be confused with overnight gaps created by the ETH session that so many traders know and understand. So now we have several gaps. This gap right here, well, it came out and it came in and many fucking times over. So this has an EV rating, a very high EV rating. Like notice how it didn't go all the way across. Once it came out the bottom, it didn't jump all the way across. So EV1, 2, 3, 4. So since it's staying above there, since it's going in there and staying in there, it's not pulling back, it's not pulling down far enough. So therefore, it's still an EV1 test. So it's coming up, but I'd give that an EV1 test. So one test, and it's accepting, which is important, meaning it's staying in there. Comes out, that's a good pullback with definitely 10 minutes in between. Comes back in, EV2, pulls out, EV3, EV4. So what I would do is, it's going to be EV4 plus plus, which means it's more than an EV4 test because of how much embedding is going on in there. Mid-roll, acceptance. So it hit the midpoint. If it goes beyond the midpoint but doesn't hit target or close to that midpoint, it gets a mid-roll rating. And since it's chopping in it, it has acceptance rating. Both of those ratings make the overall EV better. So not only is it an EV4++ mid-roll acceptance, this is the creme de la creme, meaning if we swing down really far like we have, there's a really good probability we're going to blow through it, which we did. There's other reasons why we went through, but for the sake of just looking at this one setup, there you go. And the reason it's labeled is because I can't, on a 30-second chart, I can't see all that shit. So when we go on a 30-second chart, you know, if I'm trading, you know, pre-market, I can see this label here, and this is a 30-second chart now. So I don't remember what that price action. So that label allows me to remember what the price action was. Okay. Um, Next, that was before it went through. Then it smashes through. So once it goes all the way through, then I'm gonna delete that. Um, these will all be EV zeros up here. Actually, there might be EV tests from way back when. That's the thing. This is an ongoing thing. So some of these gaps could have tests from a long time ago. So, but for the sake of this, we don't, we're just going to say there are no tests because you got to start somewhere. So now, and the thing is, I want to put this line on the side of where the price is coming from. If we're above the level, the line goes above. If we're below, it goes below. Because I need the label to be closer to where the price is approaching from. So next, I'm going to copy and adjust this. Because again, at this time, remember, we're looking at the green line to the left, and we're going to pretend like nothing happened today. So far, nothing was tested. Okay. So now we have, the gaps. There's going to be a bunch of micro gaps, which I recommend not putting on the chart. Just do that on a 30-second chart. If there's clearly a gap that's being tested, then it needs to be drawn out. But I'm not going to put gaps. I'm not going to put gaps on the chart if, if I haven't, if it's not traded it and it just, I'll draw the gap out if it's been tested and not fully jumped, or if we're approaching it intraday. So this isn't always necessary to do. However, for the sake of you guys understanding why I have yellow boxes, there you go. Like, I'm not going to go down there and do all of these gaps. The market is always going to go up, usually, and we may never see those gaps ever again. So, there's no point. I'm more interested on the upside shit, but I'm not going to. Once you start making your charts, don't go too far ahead of where the current price is. Go where you think it might go in a day or 2 days. Like, okay, there's a gap here, there's a gap here, there's a bigger one up here. I mean, that's 4,600 though. That's 100 points away. I mean, you don't need to go out that far. Just, gradually put these things in. Instead of just going all out. Because when rollover hits, it'll fuck all the levels up anyways. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you guys all should know how to draw profiles, right? You guys should all know how to draw profiles. We'll be seeing more of this intraday. And we'll put one here. I talk about how to do this in the profile video. You need to go watch it. Otherwise, but for the sake of an example, I'll put this one here. So it comes out, it comes up, 1 test, comes way out, comes in 2 tests. So this is a 2++ mid-roll with acceptance. So this will be EV222, EV2++ mid-roll acceptance. And this was always a big level. In fact, also, how many days was this? Well, this was 5 days. The profiles, we need to know how many days it was, so that will be 5 days. So that's a big fucking deal. And not only is that a big deal, but this gap as well was a big deal. I erased what it was, but you remember it had a high EV rating. So now you have a gap and a profile overlaying each other, and both of those setups can combination into each other. And you're going to see a combo trade today, later in the video, when I do a session, which I actually took and I called out in Discord. I was calling it out like this is why and stuff. So there is a Discord link in the description if you'd like to join the room. It's free. Um, I was just chatting and calling out this spectacular short, which you're going to see. And it's putting all this together. Now, here's the deal. In the overnight, we blow through this. So as soon as a white box or a profile gets completely hit on the other side, all of the levels disappear. And if it never does, it almost reaches it. I mean, if it's a tick away and it rolls back out, just delete it. But if it doesn't quite make it, the EV count keeps going up every time it comes out, and it comes out pretty decent, and it has about 10 minutes before the next test. Again, this is a dark art, so it is a bit nuanced. You don't need to be like certain things you're setting up, you'll be on the fence. Like, should it be EV1? Should it be EV2? If you're not sure, put EV 1.5. There's certain things where, like, when you're setting it up, it just kind of skews a line between yes and no and this or that. You know what I mean? So at that point, do your best to work through that. So that is the highest time frame. Now we want these things to go to the 30-second chart because we do want to know about all that crap. So here's the deal. We come up, and now we're going to look at a 30-second chart. So now we're hitting new highs of this multi-day composite. This is like new highs. So what we want to do at this point is, let's look at this is pre-market. CPI came out. So I'm going to just at this point walk you through some trades. So give me just a moment here. Since CPI boosted the market up, now what we're going to do is just walk through this today's session using older levels. Unfortunately, we can't really use the older levels because we're above them. However, what you're about to see is similar. So what you're about to see is going to be similar to how I set up, these bigger charts and shit. So let's look at the profile. And this is how I sort of back test a lot of stuff. This is a great way to back test what I do. So it's good to have this. It's good to have some of the profile down here. And this is right before the open. So I don't want to have necessarily an RTH profile start exactly at RTH because some of the price action might still be ranging and we still might be in a pre-market range. So I want to know about that as well. So I'm going to drag the profile back far enough to capture that because in the profile video, I talked about how auction processes and curves don't care about a specific time. So I'm going to go to 55, and again, I need to get rid of the value zones. So this is hypothetically my RTH session, which the RTH profile trumps all other sessions because as fresh volume comes in during the open, it will leave at the end of the day. Therefore, the liquidity in the book dries up. However, what's happening intraday and the way that profile is setting up, you have to lean into that profile as your lowest time frame profile to get into these higher time frame setups that are multi-week composites or what have you. Even the gaps as well. Because if you have a range setting up underneath one of these gaps, then that is a nuance that it won't jump. So therefore, you need to change your approach to go through the yellow gap, which, the yellow boxes are called gaps. So when you hear the term gap jump or anything gap, it is these yellow square cutouts on the profile. It is important you make the 3-year profile bars tall enough so you can visibly see those gaps because when you shrink those bars down, they become harder to pick out and see. So this is a great way to back test shit without actually doing replay is just drag the profile and just look at each bar, because that profile builds after each bar, which each bar is only 30 seconds. So we're getting these 30-second snapshots. And when I do this, I don't look at the bars in front of me. I look at it like I'm looking on the hard right edge. Too many traders will look at, you know, they'll look at prior charts and they'll use, they're not really looking at it from the perspective of the hard right edge. They're like, oh, I should have held because it went up. It's like, no, you didn't. If you didn't know it was going to go up, then you didn't know. You when you're looking at the bars and how they're testing and pivoting, you want to pretend that you can't really see what's to the right of that. So this is exactly what the profile looked like at exactly, from where I measured it at 8:06 a.m. So, or whatever. So this is how the volume profile is developing as I drag it over real time. So what we know is there's a new distribution curve forming up here. So what I want to do is, so we came down and we bounced off this high node right here on the 3-year. So again, let's pretend we can't see these bars on the right. Well, this is where we're at right now. So it bounced right here. So since it bounced right here, that's a high node. So I'm going to, prep is an ongoing thing. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to go, okay, that's an EV1 to the up. And then you have a gap down here, which it rolled a tick above it. Close enough, good enough. So I'm going to count that as a test on the gap edge. So what I'll do is put this bar here, but put it like a little bit above because it makes labeling easier. I hope that it will show up. So modify text, EV1 gap. So we're going to do that, and we're going to drag it and just put it on top of it. Sometimes I'll leave it a little bit away from it so I can grab it and modify it easier without grabbing this box on accident. We blew through this red line on CPI, so that will get modified, and that will just be 0 because it's not came back and pivoted it. I want to see it get pivoted. If it just goes through it, then it's an EV0. That goes for anything with an EV count to some degree. So I know that where the POCs and the high nodes are, I'm not going to really label those. I'm more going to lean on like these low nodes. And I'll do this to know, hey, there's low nodes here. Do any of these pink low nodes match with the 3-year? This one does, so that's probably the better bet. So here's the thing, and I'm not going to label it per se when I'm doing intraday trading. So notice how it pulls back right here. And let's really zoom in on this fucking thing so we can really get a good look at this shit. So look, it pulled back on the low node. That was a low node at that time. Now, the 3-year might be a little bit off, but so much volume is traded here that these nodes barely move. Let's pull it back to right there. Okay. So at the time, this pink node is here. And this one up here shouldn't exist because we're not there yet. So at the time of this pullback, this looked like this, right? So I want to know, hey, man, it did pivot here, and it pivoted here. So if it pivoted there, and the reason that pivot I want to know about, because it's hitting, it's still hitting in the low node section on this profile. So hypothetically, that low node is now what? An EV2. But for the sake of like not coming in and labeling it during a trading session, now we're looking at my quicker methods of just looking at this shit. And I'll mark things out like this. I'll put these little dash lines so I know it got tested twice. Okay, so that's an EV2 because I see 2 of those bars. Now I used to do this, and I used to do this like on the 10-minute chart or whatever. And the problem with marking it up like that, as time goes on, and I can't see these anymore because the charts keep going to the left, well, then I won't know that's an EV2. So that's why my prep sessions are important, because I can go back and label the actual levels. So the levels being labeled are good, so I always know what happened there, even though I can't see the price action in the actual testing when I'm on the hard right edge, and I'm only seeing this much of a chart. Hopefully that makes sense. However, intraday, on a 30-second intraday, I can see the full chart usually, so this is good enough. So they come in, and let's just keep dragging the profile. Okay. So I'm looking also at like micro ranges. So there's sort of a micro range right here. You can see it would be this one right here. That's the midpoint, that's the lower point, and that's the upper point. Well, as it comes in, it rolls the midpoint. However, it then bounces here. So I know that when it presses on this yellow bar, since there's a range here and it already accepted it, like this is micro exception. So let's make this actually a little bit easier. Okay. So I look for these little micro ranges. All right. So this is essentially what a micro range is. It's all a micro, like a super clean micro range is a bell curve. But I don't need to draw the bell curve to see that. So I can see it without doing that. And this is essentially anything you've... Oh, we should probably do that on a with a white box. So I'm doing this intraday, but there's a quicker method to doing this shit. So put that down. So instead of drawing everything I'm doing right now and then going EV1, this little micro range is less than 10 minutes. So, you don't want to put a shitload of weight on it. I won't draw a profile unless it's more than 10 minutes. However, that's 4 minutes. However, we can still use them to get into bigger picture setups. You don't want to trade something that's only worth, how many ticks is that? 7 ticks. That's just really not worth trading. You run into too much risk trying to get that. However, if we think there's a higher time frame way of us to continue to go up, this profile is now like a trigger. So, but instead of me like looking at it from this perspective, I don't need any of this shit. So, what I can do is use a yellow line and go, okay, it tested this over here. And then it came in, and then it's testing this area, which it makes sense to test this area because this area happens to still be a low node as well. And I'm really, the whole methodology of what I'm doing is really tracking the ping-ponging, and I want everything to be like pivoted and tested. All these like major areas or smaller major areas, I want to make sure everything's getting pivoted and tested. And you'll see as we continue. But the more stuff gets pivoted and tested, it's creating these pressure points. So therefore, when the price action's ready to go, it's almost, I'm not going to have troubles fighting my way into a trade. Is it going to continue to run? Well, fuck, it pivoted this area and it didn't pivot this area. Therefore, the trade's going to come back. Or if it didn't pivot this area, I need to scale out right here. I know a lot of what I'm doing is, rather complex. However, 95% of traders fail And watching these super easy tutorials don't work because you can't learn how to trade like that, in my opinion. And this is really what I do is really simple for me. It's just fractal and it's just being done on different time frames. Other than that, it's really just the same shit being cut up into different time frames. And I have the bandwidth capacity to just track it all at this point. So let's keep looking and dragging this profile over. So, at this point, it pivots these low nodes, and we know there's a micro range here. And then also, hell, let's take it one step further. There's a fucking micro gap here. We could lean on this fucking micro gap too. And that's the thing. If I wasn't trading correlated markets, I would probably lean on more things like this. Notice like this micro gap. When it came up here, it tested it once. So really that micro gap being only so many ticks, like the smaller the gap, the easier it's going to be to get through it. The bigger it is, the more complex it is to get through it. The more problems. Anything that is a bigger picture pattern, whether it's a profile or a gap or a composite, the larger they are, the larger the range, the sloppier it is, the more test it needs. So that's an EV1 gap. So we had blown through it prior, right? Like if I drag this back, you can see we went through the fucking hell. We mid rolled it right there. You know what I'm saying? We mid rolled it right here. And by the way, this gap was here before these price bars came in. Okay, because this is a 3-year profile, and many, 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 many days had created this price action, so it's more rigid. So like these low node pockets don't get filled in as quick as they do on an RTH profile like this. So like to track it from this point forward, we bang off that. I know there's a micro range, so that's like 2 setups in one. Not only do I have a gap, but also I'm pivoting this as well. So I can put 2 slashes like, hey, that's an EV2, just real quick. Otherwise, labeling and all this becomes real complex. While that's very useful, it starts to take up too much time in the heat of the moment. So doing little simple things like this helps. So we come down, we pivot here, and then we come up, and then right here, this would be like, notice it tested again. That would make that go to EV2. Just that bar right there. This little micro test would make it an EV2, and then it kind of comes back off. But now it's like the price is starting to hold above both of these low nodes. So this goes to an EV2, and since it's testing the shit, this also goes to an EV2 because that's a micro curve. So this is like a white box and a yellow box. So that's like really bonus at this point. This is 2 setups overlapping each other. 2 setups that I have a lot of statistical edge on from stat tracking. So, and they're both like right on top of each other. So there's a quick push. Now the thing is, I don't want to be trading this garbage because it's worth 7 ticks and I'm risking way too much to pick up peanuts like that. And quite frankly, between you and me, I don't think it's worth it. But nonetheless, at the time, if you're more of an aggressive scalper, this is an example of how you can leverage this stuff. You can take this stuff and, craft it into your own trading. And by the way, when you do buy the prep sessions, you're getting, you're just seeing more and more and more and more of this stuff over and over. And last night's prep, I was very confident about the market going up. Here's a little example from that. For the forecast, again, we have a 5-day profile down here, which that's going to really push this shit. Now, it is top ticking. We should mark that. There could be a pullback to the value area high or one of these major noted areas, and then it could continue. I think CPI could fuck everything up. There's a 5-day profile up here as well, so we're kind of clashing into another 5-day profile. Since this is fresher, this has the ammunition to get us through. And look how flat it was up there, that if we go, may keep going, and all that is like stop run territory. We got this high EV7 bullshit up there as well, so there's something going on in there that it could just blast out and hit that low node up there. EV0 gap, maybe run out of steam. Okay, so now that, it blows through, I mean, leave the gap there. I don't erase it, but I need to erase these two lines. Then it comes back down, and then it's just churning on it. And at some point, there's a lot of nuance with this. I'm going to have to make a module on just gap plays, but I wouldn't trade that again. And then, look, it pivots this upper pink line, which let's see what it looked like at the time. So, right when it gets there, those are still low nodes. You can see that they are still indeed low nodes. And you can see that intraday, there's like a clear curve here. Even though there was a curve built off of this range, we still want to lean on the RTH profile. So we want to surf it like a wave almost. So as we drag it, we blow out. Now I know that there's probably a micro curve like in this section, so I do want to know about that. So I'm going to draw this, and it's really not all that great, but I want to know about this range, and I'm not going to draw a white line because I don't usually do that. Sometimes I'll draw the curve because again, this is intraday. And then we blow out. We're creating a new distribution zone up here. So hypothetically, there's a range right here. So I think that, and I'll just draw it for the sake of helping you guys out. So it should, you want to look at the range, not necessarily what the good curve would be. So it comes out. This gets close enough to this micro gap that I think that's a good test. So, my edge is in things like, my edge is in all of this pivoting and chopping. My edge is in this. So we're going to give this we're going to go ahead and ultimately it becomes an EV2. So let's just do that. EV2 gap. I'm just kind of future pacing at this point. So let's go ahead and drop that down. So I count that as a test. It comes in. I think the bottom of this range needs to pivot at least once. And, I'm going to get a little more picky about it. So let's do this. I'm more so looking at like right in this region. So let's just draw a line right here. Like I want to look for more of a square micro range. So hypothetically, that's a test. So, we'll do this. It's a test. It comes down. I think this shit needs to pivot. They pivot that. They pivot here again. Then they come out, and it's starting to get very violent. And then they mid-roll this micro range. Right here's the midpoint, roughly, and then they just mid-rolled it. So this has actually got a high probability of, like, pushing through. And then we come down, and then when we start coming back up, because it tested it, again, is this worth trading? Not necessarily, but for the sake of understanding what I look for, I want to look for more quality shit than this little peanutty shit. But these are the same principles. Then they push through that micro range, and much like a white box, we don't look at that micro range anymore. It's the same concept because it's a micro distribution zone. So they blow through it, then they test this gap again. See, this test is a little too high that I wouldn't give it an EV2 until this. So now it's at an EV2. We come up, and then it seems like there's a bigger range forming up here. So if we go over up to this point, you can clearly see there's a range forming in this section. So now we get our official top tick put in play. So now we have a fucking top tick put in play. I'm going to erase this little dotted line. So now I have a top tick put in play. So I talk about this in the profile video. Go to the chapters section and you'll see what all this means. And those of you who are prep members or what have you, you guys you're drinking from a fire hose, like a fire hydrant. You need to just keep sticking your face in it, and then eventually it starts to make sense. You just got to keep hearing all of this over and over and over, and just see me doing such a repetitive thing over and over, because that's what a trading system is, until it starts to click. Also, this curve is very beautiful. The price action is gorgeous. It's got that classic up-down, very beautiful curve. So I would say this is a high-quality curve. So since it's top ticking, not only does it top tick, but what does it do here? I talk about it in the profile video. It mid-rolls the high node. I want to track that. And then it comes up again, and then it starts coming in here. And not only does it mid-roll that, but we can start to look at this gap here. We can start to look at the gap being jumped again. So let's move the gap line. So let's zoom in even more so you guys can really see what's going on here. So there's a mid-roll right there. We come out so far, but then we breach back into the gap, and we don't go all the way across the gap. So now I'll modify that. That's an EV1 gap. I want the bar at the top because we're trading from top down. If we're trading from bottom up, I need it lower because it doesn't help me being all the way up here if I'm looking down here going into it. So now that's an EV1 gap, but not only is it an EV1 gap, it's an EV1 gap mid-roll. And I'm telling you, this gap, even though you can't really do this adjustment with the 3-year profile like I'm doing with this, where I drag it from bar to bar. This 3-year gap looked pretty identical at this time, so therefore it's more rigid. It doesn't flow and change as drastically because, again, there's hundreds of thousands of contracts that have traded here over many, many, many days and weeks. So it's more rigid. So we come up. Okay, I know I have a top tick, and as we're coming in, right in this section, we're in the value zone of this profile. See, this is what this micro profile looked like at the time. And also, you know what we're fucking doing? We're forgetting to drag the RTH session. We cannot ignore the RTH session. However, the RTH session looks the way it does. I got to go to 55 again because I want to get rid of those things. And look, Sierra Wizards, I just make Sierra barely work for myself, and I know I can make things more efficient. I just know how to trade. I barely get by with Sierra because it's so complex. Okay, so we wanna make sure that we're looking at this shit as it's unfolding, but this is still unfolding as well. This is not like a prior value zone. This is still unfolding. However, once we get on top of this yellow box, I know it mid-pivoted both the profile and the gap, and it top ticked. So those are like, that's like when I'm playing poker and I get like 3 of a kind. And it's like, okay, well, this hand is really good, so there's a high probability that it could go down. So once it starts to settle on top of that yellow box, we look to just trade across the yellow box and the green line, since they're roughly in the same spot, and just pull it. Now, that's a high probability little scalp because it has more than one thing going for it. It has so many things going for it. And those are all separate things that help create narrative and context, but they're all just converging in such a beautiful, unique way, because while all this shit is the same shit, the way it all overlaps and comes together is unique and different every fucking session for the most part. Okay? So now we go down, we flush it, and we have an EV2 gap here. Maybe I take a bunch off right here, and since I know there's an EV2 gap down here, and if for some reason I think we're going to keep flushing, then I can attempt to hold through that EV2 gap. Hell, I may even attempt to hold through this pink line or look for a bottom tick of this pink line as well, since it's a major low noted area. And it double bottoms right there. So there you go. So let's keep looking at, let's keep dragging. So right here, we probably want to cut this curve off and leave it as such. Now that's actually a pretty decent curve. This curve probably went on for a hot while, 25 minutes. So we'll go ahead and put that white line right there. Now, actually, let's not do that. Control Alt Z. Let's put it slightly below, because since the gap is on the same exact area, so we're going to put EV 0, 25 minutes. So we come down, and then we eventually, we start hitting this gap. This thing had never been pivoted. Well, actually, it's starting to get pivoted right here. You can see it hits the green line, and then it bounces. And at this point, the gap would go EV3 on this test. That's EV1. It's such a small profile that when it backs off a little bit and starts to come in, then it could be worth taking a shot. And since there's a profile here, instead of scaling some at the gap edge, we can scale it somewhere's down here, maybe either to this green line, or if we want to push it to the low node, we can attempt to do that. So next, so now that that's happened, this little micro range gets completely wiped out. Just delete that. I won't always draw them. I can visually go, hey, that's there, or what have you. We can do things like go, oh, we can go like this and go, oh, it fucking tested here, and then it went through. So now we got to get rid of that EV. We want to get rid of this gap bullshit, and then it comes up and out and never pulls back and tests it, so there's really no point in drawing it. You can if you want, but if it had wicked back down and tested the top of it, then I would draw it. But it's such a small gap, it's like, do I really want to put a bunch of weight on that? Maybe if there's other critical setups flanking it. So now we hit this low node again. So hypothetically, this is going EV3 at this point. This is EV0. I do expect a bounce here. I really don't want to trade it the first time going through, but sometimes it just goes through. So now it went through. So hypothetically, this is gone. However, let's drag this profile out. Does it still look like a profile? Yeah, it does, and now it's creating a new distribution zone up there. So let's put that back. It's a P-shaped profile. So this is one of those nuances. Okay. And then, it's starting to create a new value zone up there. So we cut that profile off. And it never created a new distribution zone down here. If it had, then I wouldn't continue to drag it to the right like I did. If it created a new distribution zone down here, I would have cut it off there, and when it came through, I would have just deleted it instead of continuing to drag it over like I did. Because hypothetically, this is just an extreme test. This is an extreme bottom tick of this range. And oftentimes when you come out at an extreme move from a curve like this, and then it rolls back in and it never creates a lower distribution curve, then there's a good chance it's going to put an extreme test up. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, usually it's a measured move. So it comes out by, about 12 ticks. Hypothetically, it could put out 12 ticks on the upside. Don't, take that with a grain of fucking salt. So, Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
There you go, 14 ticks off the other end, roughly. So, that's an extreme push. That's like almost an extreme bottom tick. And then it comes back in. And when they really swing out real far and immediately start coming back in and go through this range, There's a high probability they're going to blow it the fuck out and then run it relatively quick further on the other side. So that's how you kind of read price action. I farted. It smells horrendous, by the way. It is absolutely fucking disgusting. Um, God damn, but everybody likes their own brand. I'm very proud of it, actually. So we'll put that white box in there. They blow through the motherfucker. This is no longer an EV whatever. So we're going to make it just say, because it's already been traded, so we need to reset it. So now that's that. So let's continue to drag the RTH profile because we want to know where the key low nodes are between these things. Because again, in the profile video, if we keep cutting profiles, then we're not really seeing them as a unit because the market only goes up and down. And when you cut a profile, you're creating this horizontal action. So now we have this vertical stuff, which we need to know about. So now it's clearly creating a fucking range up here. And it's bouncing the top of this area. And it bounces it once. I'll count that because it's pretty close. Twice, thrice. Right? So that's like, at this point, it's like EV3. And this is beyond a 25-minute, by the way. What is this at? This is going to be... Alt-2 will give you this tool that'll tell you time. That's 35 minutes. That's a very respectable profile. And the POC is up in this section. Let's go ahead and bring some more pink lines in here. This is a good one right here. So, you know, whatever you want to do, if you want to make it a little bigger so it's like, hey, they match. And then we can get rid of this red line because, you know, that whatever was there got blown out. This got blown out as well. These top ticks don't even matter anymore because we're now up here. So now that we're up here, this is clearly a range, clearly a distribution zone. And hypothetically, you know, there's clearly some sort of low node action going on as well. So we want to kind of keep track of that. And since this is such a prominent profile, it's going to get more EV tests. Again, the longer they go on for, the more tests they usually get. What's the sweet spot? It really depends on the correlated markets. If correlate and that's all correlations is the same setups in different orders, and if NQ and Russell are setting up on high EV shit, it doesn't matter if it's a gap or a profile. As long as it's setting up for some high expected value or it's just above the point of control for the day, it could pull it in. So therefore, the gap in the ES could jump if the Russell's about to pull in on the, you know, the mean of a profile, and if NQ is creating a range and it top ticks that range, then this gap in ES might be a good play because they're all three doing high probability things to the downside at this moment. So therefore, that's what I definitely want to look for, because then that's like taking these same setups, putting them on other markets, and having even more factors of support to take a trade. That's why I'm saying I want to trade some of this little bullshit. Unless all three markets are like, hey, this is going to definitely go, then fuck it. Let's take the scalp. And guys, you can support me on my coffee without paying for prep if you would like. If you think this is a great quality video, minimum donation's like $3. So if you really appreciate this in-depth tutorial I'm doing, show me some love. I'm also really enjoying talking about this, by the way. So, you know, now we have EV3, right? 1, 2, 3. Then it goes 4. Comes out. Now it's pivoting the backside of this low node. Okay? Now it's pivoting the backside of this low node. So that's like EV1 on that low node. And I know it's overshooting. Is it hitting that mid pivot? Not quite. It is actually kind of mid pivoting the range though. So hypothetically speaking, it mid pivoted the dead center of that range, this taller range. So hypothetically, that's a mid pivot. And it's also a high node on the 3-year as well. So, that's got a lot of shit holding it down. So I know that if it comes up, because it's a low node, a mid of a range, and a high node on the 3-year, it's going to probably need more than one test to actually go through back up on the other side. So now we're at an EV4 on here. So we'll give it an EV4. Bounces out, comes in again. I would maybe make it an EV4 plus because there's not enough time. Then it hits the top of that gap, which that gap's an EV0. So to me, it makes sense the gap needs to bounce at least once. So we'll do that. EV1 gap. And then it comes out, pivots again. I'll keep it at an EV4 plus. I'm not going to make it a plus plus per se. And then, it tests here again on that low node, makes sense. Comes back in. What are the other markets doing? And also on this specific day, I was so long biased that I thought this just would continue to go up. So you got to look at these things on the very highest of time frames to be like, this could keep going. Plus, you didn't get a top tick of this shit, and this is kind of more of an extreme bottom tick of this now current range up here. So, really it depends what's happening. And now we bounce and we come up and we blast through this range. But much like this prior range where it was an extreme push down, this is still like an extreme bottom tick of this upper range. So therefore it should do about an equal distance on the way up. So, how many ticks is that? That's about 6 ticks. Again, take that with a grain of salt. And when it comes out, it's about 10 ticks. So roughly the same. Take that with a grain of salt, though. You know what I mean? And then it blows out. So let's continue to drag, this over. And by the way, since this range is here, I want to delete this. So otherwise, the profiles start to clusterfuck each other. So, I just, I want to. Where the fuck did I draw this all the way to? All right. So that's a pretty key low node. Okay, so this is gone. So now I know I have like a distribution zone right here when it came out, so I could draw it. That's definitely a curve, and it blows out. But I still, even though it still looks good and it's still building, I want to look at the range. Like I want to look at the range, not necessarily the curve, because this is its own range. So let's delete that. This is its own range. And I really, I still want to know about it. So we come out the top end, right? That's a lot of absorbing, by the way. So now let's go ahead and just draw a white line. I said a white line. Okay. So over time, I would count this as the first test, EV1, EV2, mid-roll, and then it comes out. EV2, mid-roll, No acceptance. It didn't really chop in there. And then, we come out of that range, right? Um, so I do expect this pink area that's not really pivoted to potentially hold because of how the RTH session is setting up, right? And then, we come back in. Oh, and now you have this fucking gap here. It hits it once, comes out, hits it twice. I would probably give this an EV3. Well, you have another test there and another test there. So EV1, EV2, EV3, EV4, EV5. How big is the gap? Oh, it's mid-rolling. So modify it. Mid-roll. What did I say? EV5. And it does have acceptance. Like it's chopping and staying in it. Which, it is what it is. So, there's also a range up here as well, which finally top ticks. Hold on, just use yellow. Really, it top ticks at that point, and then as this continues to go, the top of this range has been tested quite a bit. EV2, I would count this as an EV3-ish because it's about a tick away. So modify text. The problem is like if it's like ranging between shit and it's clearly doing like the first fight might be good if the EV is high enough. But if you start to notice it's ranging between these things, that's when the system has problems and you just got to let go. So we come through, we almost make it to target. However, there's a real micro range right here, super consolidated, and we're kind of bouncing under it. So it makes sense that, but also this is the point of control, and you don't really want to be trading off these points of control. So that's going to cause a lot of sloppiness in the price action. So then we puke all the way across this white box, which now is, well, it's gone. And then we pivot sort of off of this pink line, come in, and then we hit this, which now goes to an EV 5, by the way. And that low note is, we'll keep it. But at some point, it's like you need to get rid of this shit. So that's now an EV5. See, I can't grab it, so it's like I have to. Okay, so now let's drag that back down. Okay. There's clearly some sort of a range up here. Very evident that there's a range up in this section at this point. I can clearly see it. So that gives you an idea. It tested it once, rejected here. Coming back up, tested again. I think this is correct. So at that point, that becomes a gap mid roll. And then we come back in. This pink line's already been tested once. And this is such a high EV section. What are the other markets doing that since it's so high, it makes sense that it will potentially overshoot it, being how small it is. And that's exactly what the fuck happens. Is it over? I actually took a short in NQ right at this section, by the way. I'm in it. I'm in NQ, by the way. Looking at 1812 something. Let's attempt to get one of these off. Okay, we're not going to get... It is mid-rolling. We want to attempt to get one of those off, and then we can hold this to 1825, which is down here. We're out. I didn't realize it was going to puke as far, but NQ also had a very similar structure in the same area. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take it. And it was happening in ES. I just didn't catch it. And then Russell was mean reverting back down when we were right here. So that helped pull the move down. So now this area up here is about an EV2-ish, 3 maybe. So I'll give it a 2 plus because of test 1, test 2, test 3. So EV2 plus. And how long has this gone on for? 45 minutes. So that is a respectable curve. Again, I talk about the longer a curve goes on for, the harder the throw out should be. So we blow through and we kind of pull back to this low node / high node area. So, we could make sure we know that that happened. And then the white box disappears. I mean, it's the same shit over and over and over. You just want to make sure you're getting like all the pivots are done and what have you. So I want to keep this zoomed out. I like to keep them a little so I can really see what's going on. So this is an EV3 zone here, and hell, I mean, look, it makes sense. If it's gonna go, it could blow that. Yeah, it could pivot these sections or what have you. Actually, there was a micro gap here. Let's delete that. And this, actually, there was a micro gap here that. Oh, they flushed it. They never tested, so that would be EV0. But either way, they flush it, and then it forever. But what is it doing down here? Well, it's bottom ticking relatively clean. And this gap is such a massive gap that it's such a big gap down here that it makes sense it needs to test it a few times before it completely flushes through. So, you got EV1, EV2-ish, 3, 4-ish. So we'll give it an EV3 plus just to be safe. Little questionable, so don't hurt your brain thinking about it too much. Okay, so now, we come down, and when you have a flush like this, for me, it's like really hard to. You just got to let it cook and bake in the oven. I just patiently wait. And now it's clearly creating a distribution zone down here. It's clearly creating a range. And it makes sense that these low nodes would maybe push it back, maybe leaning on this one, like on this one test. Then you have a top tick, so it could be shorted in this section. Let's drag this over. It's not, well, now these low nodes are kind of no good at this point that we want to like just kind of honestly not lean on them. Because now they're not quite. The better ones are here, and now this has this double distribution zone. So, they come up and pivot off of that. However, the fucking thing is just keeps going up. So, sometimes you're going to have problems. So let's keep going. So now at this point, we know there's a curve down here. We know there's a range down here. And then it goes to a second distribution curve. So I mean, I want to know about this range, right? Same. It's just the same shit over and 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 over. It is literally the same shit. Over and over. Same fucking shit. That's it. Obviously, tracking it and being aware of things is a lot of work, but let's EV1 2 plus EV2 plus. How long did this go on for? Alt or Alt 2. An hour, so it's a 1H for 1 hour. Then we're also pivoting off of this as well, so I will, and it needs a pivot here. This is a major composite low node. This is also a 3-year, so it makes sense that it will pivot here. So that's an EV1. So that, and we bottom tick the entire session, so it makes sense that this could be the bottom at this point, and then it's a big ass gap, and they don't jump the first go. And then we're like micro ranging off of it, so it makes sense that this could be the bottom. So, we have the range top roughly here. Now, it might be higher or lower if I don't draw the profile. See, for me, I calculated it different. I look at the actual top of the range, and I didn't draw the profile during the session. Close enough. So it pivots at 1, 2-ish times, right? Then we come up here and we pivot these pink lines. I mean, fuck, dude, it's low nodes, right? Here's the profile at the time, and they pivot the fucking low nodes. And it's also the low nodes in the 3-year section, so there's a good chance it could pivot that. So I don't want to I want to see the pivot before I go the long. So now we got the pivot. That makes a long slightly better if it decides to actually fucking go. So, comes down, it's clearly creating a new range. Then you get the EV2 on that bullshit, and then it comes up, gets stuck in the low node. That makes sense. That's going to happen. Let's just delete them for now. Again, this is sort of a micro range, and it mid pivots at once. So when it comes back up, there's a good chance it could go through the micro range, which doesn't take as many tests like these bigger ranges do to like go through them. So if I'm like hell bent on a long, that might be the sign. And it pivoted the low node up there as well. So, it's got a little something going on. Now, do I necessarily want to take that? Not entirely. So now we're starting to come up. Well, what the fuck? Let's adjust our low node. And this low node is kind of not looking like a good low node, but since the ranging on the price action is like cut and a lot of it is above it and a lot of it is below it, we do want to kind of look at that key low node, even though this profile is starting to get real flat looking. So now it's starting to go from support, from resistance to support, essentially. You fucking test a motherfucker once, then you kind of test it twice because there's another low node, a very major prominent one on the 3-year. So kind of looking at it as like a skewed section. And then also, this is the top of a range. So now, I mean, much like where that white line is, this is the top of the range. So, I mean, it's pivoted once, twice. And by the way, this is actually leading into a very good trade, by the way, that I actually took. So, this range or whatever went on for 46 minutes. We'll just put 45. So these are really good ranges for how long they have gone on for. So, we come up. Uh, this pivot kind of sucks, but this is a better test and pivot up in this section, right? A better test and pivot up in this section. And then it's really kind of railing on this low node, which also is a high node as well. What I noticed, though, in the price action, it was getting tighter and tighter, and it was getting harder and harder, each of these ranges to push the market up. So now there's another micro range up here, right? And we could probably, here. So there's another micro range right up in this section. Let's zoom in. You can clearly see this micro range up here. And it bottom ticks and shoots the market up. It's all the same shit, really. So it comes up and then it tests, but it mid pivots, and then it comes out of the mid pivot. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. So you have an EV1 mid roll. Okay. But here's another micro range up here. It needs to pivot the back end of this micro range. And what does it do? It mid pivots the back end of this really consolidated micro range because it's gone on forever. But also, when we zoom in, what the fuck is this? Guess what this is? A fucking channel. And these fucking channels, when they puke, they fucking puke. They will puke so fucking hard because of how they just do. And so sometimes you guys in prep will see me, do this. Prep guys will see me like do this where I make like all the channel lines. We're not doing that. Those are like smaller, tighter channels. Reason being is like there's a range down here, there's a range up here, there's a range up here. So this channel is like thicker and bigger, and it's being created on ranges that are constantly stacking on top of each other. So you have the range down here, which is an EV2. You have the range down here, which is an EV2. Then you have another range here, which just EV1 mid-rolled. So at this point, I know I have a high risk to reward trade. I know at this point that, and also this gap was good on the way up. By the way, look how it came into the gap, mid-pivoted, come out, mid-pivoted, come out. So it made sense that after this huge downswing right here, that since it really came into this micro gap and it's coming back into this range, it makes sense that once it really burrows in, that there's a good chance it'll go across that micro gap. But is that good enough risk to reward? It depends on so much other shit. So now we puke really hard, and I know it's going to mid pivot off the back of this. And I'm looking for a short because there's this straight line called a reclaim. And those of you who do my prep sessions, you'll notice at times I'll make reclaim boxes. And they've been blue as of lately. Again, if you're interested in the prep, link in the description to go to the coffee, join the membership tab, and then you get access to tens of hours of my prep sessions. So these really hard flushes tend to get filled in. So they filled it in and then it's gone. So reclaiming is a whole nother concept in video. But anytime the market flushes hard, they typically take it back. They took it back on a steady push up. The thing is, the way it's channeling up, buyers are really struggling to press it up. They are, because it keeps dumping and dumping and dumping. But there's all these higher lows, which these are multiple setups. They're multiple ranges stacked on top of each other with really good EV ratings that when one pukes, it'll combo into the range below it. So this is how I combo trades. When I made 14 grand in the moonshot video, it was essentially a combination of shit. And this is what makes a risk-reward trade better. All the chopping and tracking it makes trades better for my system. When the market is just ripping and there's nothing to lean on, nothing to pivot on, well, then it's just like, for me, that's a gamble. But all this tracking, all this, these are pressure points. And I know, and it makes me more confident to holding. So we pivot in, and at this point, it's like, depending on what's happening in the other markets, and we can probably get rid of that. At this point, it's like, dude, it's also a kind of a key low node on the 3-year too, and it's getting stuck in it. And it makes sense to then pivot off the bottom of that range because it's gone on for 30 fucking minutes, and it's that tight and that small. Yeah, exactly 30 minutes, and it's that tight and that small. And then there's a shitload of accumulation. Something weird's going on in the price action right there. And I can see it on the order flow. There's just something about it. The bars are tighter. Notice how they're not as tall as the other bars. So it's getting really absorbed up there. And then other markets were keying me off to getting short, and I did get short here as well. So as it comes down, I'm going to hold it because I know there's a good chance, we're going to fucking puke the motherfucker. So, boom, we hit, we finally get all the way across this micro range. So that one's done. And now this one is an EV2, EV4, EV5, EV6. And then this gap is like holding down too. So this gap is getting a high EV rating as well. I mean, fuck, what is that gap getting, Give me just a moment. This gap is like EV1, EV2, EV3. So we're going to give it an EV3 rating. And the thing is, since it's clearly ranging underneath the gap, you don't want to trade the gap. The gap can get like a super high. This is one of those nuances. I don't want to trade this gap because it's clearly ranging here. You're going to get fucked up every time. It's when it comes out and comes back in and it tests the gap, then it might be good. But it tests it after the close, and then it drifts up through it. And I don't trade after the close because the volatility is atrocious. So we puke it, and I hold to like 3s. I take a bunch off at 3s, and then I took the rest off at 5s. But I sat in this trade forever. I was super confident. You can, go in the Discord, and you can look at me just calling it out and talking to other traders and telling them why I'm holding. I'm just like, to me, this was these trades don't come around that often. You just had a combination of high EV stuff. And like I said, it's all the same shit. It's just like, how is it stacked on top of each other? And I want to see like everything get pivoted a reasonable amount of times. And if you have a bunch of shit that's pivoted above or below where you're currently trading and they're all comboing into each other, then you're going to get these you're going to get a higher probability one-way move where the trade doesn't come back and is more likely to hit target. Because for my system, I'm tracking every little pivot, and I'll scale areas that aren't pivoted. That's why it's like, okay, it didn't pivot here. How high probability will it pivot here? Let's scale it out. So this is how I manage the trades, is based off of this type of shit. Or this is how I let a trade come back to me. It's like, okay, well, it can pivot off my entry at least once. Or I scaled some out, then I'll add back in because I know I might get a pivot off of my entry because of this stuff, because it doesn't have any EV. So, yeah, that's essentially all the trading system is. It fucking pukes really hard. It rotates 500. Also, this is the first time we're seeing 500 in like a year or two or something like that. And we had just blitzed through it. And these institutional players want to play 500. So they were mostly playing above it. So institutional sellers that want to play around 500, they're getting a better deal above 500 than they would at exactly 500. And then we clean bounce 500. These psych prices are like high nodes where they can cleanly pivot. So, but I don't draw shit up. I just kind of keep that in my head. So much like the principles of gaps or profiles or ranges, a psych price like a high node will mid pivot. Um, just so you know. So there's a good chance it'll go through on the next go down here because it literally mid pivoted 500 like as clean as it gets to the tick. Um, and you know that's that. And most of the day the sellers were working tens and fives and 15s, so they're working a 15 20 point range above 500. And this is just context that you can't see in this. I just want to explain part of why I wanted to short it. um, and also you have the CPI reclaim, which I think it needs to dump through here, which this reclaim, it happens to be on a gap. So if we hit this gap in the next few days, just know that this could puke hard. And since we're ranging up here and this range is a full day pretty much, once we start puking, the puke can be like tremendously hard where it overshoots this gap a little bit. Now this gap is a bit sloppier, that there's a micro gap here, and there's kind of this bump in the profile. So it could trade through there like shit, but you have this hard move up where there's like it just went straight up because there was no liquidity. I mean, hell, it went down. Or wait, yeah, it went just straight up because all the liquidity pulled. So that's kind of a void in the order flow that's going to get taken out. How does it go down? Probably not as quick. Much like this one, it'll maybe grind through. Who knows? But since this is a larger range, in the range video, I talk about how these things, since it's a full day, the likelihood of it pumping out the other side and going real far is really good. Now, if this thing ranges and it goes up really high and it's more than a top tick and then comes through, oh yeah, it's going to really shoot out on the other end then, much like we saw earlier with these micro ranges. It's all fractal, and that's it. And you're just keeping track. All this stuff is keeping track of this shit on multiple time frames. So we're organized because it is a lot to track. However, there's a lot of edge in tracking it. And really it's not and then when you add another like correlated markets, it gets a little more complex that you got to watch more shit. However, it's the same thing. And Russell may not be on a gap, NQ may be on a gap, and then Russell could have a top tick, and once Russell top ticks that and Russell's starting to take into a range again, that will help drive the puke on ES or NQ. So it's really just using the same things, overlaying them, and having multiple factors of support for getting into the trade. In prep, you won't see really many of these dashes or pink lines because this is a way to track an intraday. However, that's pretty much it. You may see support and resistance lines, which, for instance, right here, I want to track, here, 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 here. So clearly there's support here, and it's tested it once, twice, thrice. So, and then sometimes there'll be orange, and then there'll be a bunch of different colors because I want to change the colors if it resupports here each day, so I can kind of have an idea that it's pivoted here this many days. So at this point, I'm going to label one of these, and it's going to say, 3 pivots. So 3 major pivots. And it's not like EV counting. It sort of is EV counting. But I want to know, the reason I'm tracking every little pivot down there is because I want to know if certain bars, and these need to be a little more accurate. They're usually to the tick, like this, and then hell, I'll just, to the tick, because I want to know if we're pivoting the same exact region. Like we pivoted this same area to the tick. So then I would dash dot it. So it would go dash dot like this. So it pivoted there twice. And if it pivots the same thing exactly there 3 times, I mean, it can go through it, but if it comes back and retouches it, it'll be a full dash. So dots represent one pivot on this specific node. Dash dot is 2 pivots on this specific tick, and three all dashes is 3 or 4 or more exact pivots. And support and resistance is more so an area than an actual line. And for whatever reason, we keep re-supporting in this section. So I'm going to look at this entire range as support and resistance. And because, like, you know, between here and here was almost 3 hours, and between here and here is like almost 3 hours. So that's substantial. So there's something going on to really like pivot the fucking market here. There is something going on that is really holding the market up in this general region. So that is support and resistance. And just seeing, I want to, and why I do those lines is if there's a cluster fuckus of a shitload of those lines, I rather trade near the heavily populated cluster fucked area than where one might be an outlier, like this one way down here, which should be exactly on this pivot low. And this also helps me keep track of bottom ticks. And then we can also label has bottom ticked as well. So really, I usually do these at the. Let me do it exactly how I do it. I'll label the furthest, the furthest area. 3 pivots. Once it becomes days, then it might be 2-day pivot. So it could say 3-day pivots, 2D tests, or 2 days. 2 days. And then it could be like, and then it could go to 4 pivots. And then it's now 2 days. So now I know it's pivoted there 4 times over the course of 2 days. Really, in this example, it's only 3. And having that label helps me not have to go all the way to the back and look at the chart or zoom out on a higher time frame chart. Now I have these labels on all of this. This is why it's such a heavy deal, so I can stay zoomed in and stay on the important price action that is happening now and have these labels that are giving me critical information about prior price action without me needing to go back and look at that price action. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, with the support and resistance, I'm looking for like heavier populated areas. Like I rather trade here than here or what have you. And we swept this range too. So this goes. And now this is what's going on now. There, and look how badly it's holding up in this section under this pink line. In my opinion, tomorrow, if we set up tomorrow, and I think we're going to still potentially continue to go up. Maybe this video comes out after tomorrow, but I'm saying it right now. It's 7:12 at 9:25 p.m. I really do believe that because of what's happening on higher time frames below us, which I talk about in my prep, last night on the 11th, I think this could still continue to potentially keep going up. And now seeing this new price action and how much it's pivoting in this pink area, which is a high node on the 3-year and a low node on the, RTH, I really think there's a high potential that it will go. The gap is EV5 with a mid-roll and an ACC tag, so that makes that even better. So now I'm more likely to hit with like a full clip, meaning 12 lots max, because I scale between 2, 4, 8, 12s. Since this looks so sweet and sexy, I'm probably going to hit that. It depends what Russell's doing, because Russell can really fuck up a setup. That's why I like looking at Russell. NQ and ES kind of do similar shit, but then they do their own thing at the same time. I love Russell being an outlier, but Russell does the same exact shit. All markets really do the same exact shit. I see it in stonks too, even though it looks a little fucked up with the profiles at times. It's the same shit. It's the same shit, and there's statistics to back it up. Like most of the time we mean revert, and I don't know. And then the gap jump's my oldest playbook setup, which now you guys know what it is. Um, but it's so nuanced, and you guys need to see millions of examples like this. So it's like, for me, I'm not afraid of sharing this shit on the internet, because I've shared my live trading for since January of 2020. I would stream for years up until recently, and most people don't. It takes them forever to figure it out, and even then they don't fully do it. So, but it's good to see exactly what I'm doing, and you take things you like, learn them. You don't need to do all of this. Like, take components and learn each component one at a time, and you know, there you go. So, and we're also compressing as well. Notice how it looks like a wedge, but it's kind of like, it's like a rising wedge. I think we're going to go through, most likely. There's a really good chance we go through. And hell, this little micro range actually just got tagged. So now I'm going to go to the 10 minute, and look how it's just wedging up. And we're just coming out of a major shit. So I want to remember, if it's a 5-day range or composite that's breaking, it's going to probably go for a few days in the same direction. So this is why my charts are such a mess, because I need to know this information to really press a trade. And also, another reason I was getting short in this region is NQ top ticked the highest time frame, a 240 minute. And in the prep, I've been talking for weeks and weeks up until a certain point that I think NQ needs to hit this region, and it fucking finally did. So I knew NQ from the highest time frame, a 240 minute chart. When you top tick on a 240 minute chart on a multi-week range, that down move is going to be substantial. So that's part of why I held the short right up in that fucking section as well. And then when we go to the fucking 10 minute here, drag this composite all the way over, there's clearly a new distribution zone up here. Whatever's down here is a big fucking deal. This red line right here is a big fucking deal at this point. Big deal. This is all just an RTH profile, because if we go to the RTH session, it's the same profile right here that you're seeing up here. But now that's a new distribution zone. And now it's all compressed out. So on the 10 minute, it's kind of making a pennant formation, yet it's starting to get stuck up here. So, like, hypothetically, there's a wedge here. So what I think could happen is it could blow through this high EV gap, high EV range, and really top tick, maybe go further. And then you have such a prominent node copy. So what I would do is, copy and adjust, and then slap it down right there. And there's one up there as well. I think that might pull it, and I think it might deflect it. Who knows? On my official charts, there might actually be information up there. But again, I was requested to do this from scratch. So now I think we could potentially, bang up there, especially because of what's happening lower. Beyond that, I don't know what's going to happen. And what makes going through this section even better is, like, we haven't been there for how many hours now? 10 hours and 40 minutes. So, like, price over time makes expected value better. The further it goes down, the longer it takes before the next test, the better it's going to be when it finally goes through. Just how it is. Okay, guys, again, I hope you guys enjoy this. This is a 2-hour video. I'm going to be up late editing this, so show me some love on coffee. Either get the prep, where you just hear more and more of this, Or what you can do is just send me $3. Anyways, I think you guys should go watch these other 2 videos if you haven't, because it will help make this make more sense. This is sort of a follow-up, and this video is combining those 2 things together, and there will be more modules on gaps and whatnot in the future. See you in the next one.